Appreciate you all being here. We're kind of working through, just for those who are new, just kind of bring you up to speed a little bit. We're working on a book called Charity for All. And by charity, we don't mean the handout version of that. That might be what you do, but it's love. That's really what charity, the real definition of charity is love. And that might include giving somebody something, but it's much bigger and broader than that. And by saying charity for all, it means loving all people, regardless of whether they're nice or not. Jesus chose to love the Romans that were hanging him on the cross and the Jews who prosecuted him. And he's a wide variety of people. Obviously, it was easier for him to love his mother because she was loving him pretty good, and that's easy. But how easy would it be to love the person who's literally putting a nail into your arms? I mean, that's really pretty tough. So we're working through, how did Jesus pull this off? He works through his life. So we're working through really the Gospel of Matthew. When my wife and I first started working on this, we thought we would do all the Gospels. But we're already close to page 100 and we didn't even get through Matthew. So we thought, well, maybe we'll just do this just in Matthew and see how it goes. So this week we're on actually Matthew chapter 8. And I'm going to read 3 stories from Matthew chapter 8. And we're going to talk about, and I want to hear from you, so you can be thinking of the answers as we're doing this. What are the similarities and what are the differences in these 3 stories? So we're looking for similarities and differences in this story. So Matthew chapter 8, verses 5 through 6 says this. When he had entered Capernaum, a centurion came forward to him, appealing to him. Lord, my servant is lying paralyzed at home, suffering terribly. And he said to him, I will come and heal him. But the centurion replied, Lord, I am not worthy to have you come under my roof, but only say the word and my servant will be healed. For I too am a man under authority with soldiers under me. And I say to one, go, and he goes, and to another, come, and he comes, and to my servant, do this, and he does it. When Jesus heard this, he marveled and said to those who followed him, truly, I tell you, with no one in Israel have I found such faith. I tell you, many will come from east and west, recline at table with Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob in the kingdom of heaven. While the sons of the kingdom will be thrown into the outer darkness. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And to the centurion Jesus said, go, let it be done for you as you have believed. And the servant was healed at that very moment. So that's story 1. Verse 14. Then when Jesus entered Peter's house, he saw his mother-in-law lying sick with a fever. He touched her hand, and the fever left her, and she rose and began to serve him. So, touched her, he healed her. Then verse 16. That evening they brought to him many who were oppressed by demons, and he cast out the spirits with a word and healed all who were sick. So 3 stories there. What are the similarities? Healing. They all received healing. They all needed healing. All received it. 100% of those. Other similarities. Faith. There was a requirement of faith involved. The centurion for somebody else. Peter's mother, we don't even know if she wanted to be healed. I mean, there's no word of her saying do it. She just happened to be sick, and Jesus was in the room and did it for her. And then a sort of people, we're going to assume all of them wanted to be healed because they're all coming to him. If you didn't want to get healed, you probably didn't go to Jesus. So it's just kind of way that would have worked. So other similarities.
Whether distance or far, the demons have to bow down to Christ, obviously.
The enemy is, Jesus in charge. I want to highlight this. This isn't necessarily part of the book, but it is important to grasp. Is Jesus is always in charge. When they come to arrest him, who decides when he's going to be arrested? He did. What's also an interesting proposal. I'm listening. I listen to a lot of different people, and I'm listening for stories. Is that if you read in the scriptures, it says they did not want to arrest him during the feast. Jesus got them to arrest him during the feast. So he was in charge of even that piece. So he's in charge of the demons and the enemy and sicknesses. That's also true today. If you have a sickness, he is in charge. All you got to do is say, Jesus, take charge of this. And he will do what he needs to do with it. So it's not an automatic that he's going to heal you necessarily. But it is something he is fully capable of doing. So what are the differences? Mike mentioned the distances.
You touch the type of healing. You touched some and didn't touch another.
Yeah, so he didn't have to be close by. Somebody touched, somebody didn't.
Some cried out with faith and others didn't.
Some had to borrow other people's faith. I mean, Peter's mother, we don't hear anything about her faith, but he was welcomed in. The centurion's servant, we don't even know if he believed anything. We know nothing about that servant, really. I know the Chosen came up with a storyline that's highlighted, but if we all, you have, in the modern era, we don't have, most of us don't have servants. I guess that isn't really a thing. I guess you could have servants. But most of us don't have servants. But we do have employees, people who work for us, or we have people we work with. So that might be in a similar sort of vein. Can you possibly love them enough that you would bring them to Jesus if they needed that kind of healing? Other differences. Location, they're all kind of in the vicinity of where Jesus is hanging out, as he's working with them. I don't remember exactly where he's at in this section, but, in Israel, all in that area.
Some have only heard of Jesus through continued ministry or somebody sharing the word. So people he hadn't even met, hadn't even seen, has heard of him in that time.
And there was a physical need to actually see him, but we didn't have there wasn't anybody making social media posts and saying this is what I saw Jesus do. There weren't like newspapers telling everybody all this stuff. It was just simply word of mouth that would have drawn them in. We're starting to talk about the third story of all these people coming. It wasn't just one. So some other similarities is they all had a need to be healed. So think about in our own lives. We all have a need to be healed. And so there's some similarities among all of us in this room. We all have a need to be healing. I'm not just talking about a shelter guest. We're talking about staff and all of us. We have a need to be healed. Sometimes there are things going on in our own bodies that we don't necessarily share with everybody. And so we have a need for healing, is a desperate need. There might be similarities in addictions. And this I had an interesting story. I hang out with other people who work with addiction. And so I learned from them. And something that we've all noticed is that when I first started doing this 23 years ago, each of the addictions were separated out. So you had somebody who was an alcohol addiction, and somebody with marijuana, and then somebody with amphetamines, and then somebody else with something else. And it was kind of all, each was their own group. Now it's all just one big gel. I mean, it's like everybody's addicted to everything. And so it's a world change. But so there might be an addictive need. So addiction might be a need for helping those who are oppressed. We're talking about helping people in need. But each one of those are also very different. So the way he's working with one is going to be the way he works different with somebody else. We're trying to learn how to love. It means we're going to have to say, okay, there's some similarities. So we're all going to take an addiction recovery class because we all have this addiction issue. We're all going to do that. But within that, we're going to talk to you and treat you differently. So a lesson we can learn from Jesus on that. The other piece that we see that's very similar is that there was concern and effort that was taken. We didn't just lay around and say, oh, woe is me, poor me. I'm going to go home and cry about my sister or my brother or my servant in the centurion's place. I'm going to do something about it. Many times when we come to Jesus, we want him just to do it all. We sit on the couch and say, yay, I'm made better. Just make me better. I'm going to lay on the couch. I'm not going to do anything. I had a really good friend, and we had been praying for, he had this stomach thing going on. It was late 90s. And we were praying for him pretty consistently. And it continued on in early 2000s. It just never seemed to get better. Sometimes it would be better than others, but it was always an issue. And we were praying for him. And one day, this pastor who wasn't really part of the group, he had joined us that day. I don't remember why he joined us. He just happened to be there. And as he was praying, he said, he just kind of felt this feeling, in the scriptures they would call it, a word of faith, saying something out. He said, or a word of wisdom is probably more accurate to what he was doing. He said, you know what? I don't know much about this thing. And there's this new thing called gluten. Try eating, stuff without wheat in it, just as a heart. Now, he just says this. He doesn't really know much about it. He just met this guy. He just mentions that. So the guy experiments for the next 2 weeks. He quits eating, biscuits and pastries, and he was a guy who liked to eat that stuff. But for the next 2 weeks, I can go without it. And his stomach problems got all better. 100%. But it took a word. So sometimes Jesus is going to heal through a word of wisdom from somebody else, and sometimes there's no doubt in my mind Jesus could say, "Boom, stomach better. Go eat your donut." And for me, I'd rather him do it that way if I got that issue. I had a friend who couldn't eat meat. That was his prayer. Man, I just want to eat meat. He wasn't allowed to eat beef. He got bit by a tick. I can't remember. There's a disease that comes with tick. So he couldn't do it.
My cousin died of Lyme, tick disease.
Yeah. So the point, he does it differently, depending on what the need is. So, but there is that concern and there's effort that took place. We have to do something. He had to hear that word of wisdom, and he had to do something different. But what if he just said, "Oh, I'm just going to wait and let God heal me"? It could have happened anyway. I mean, somewhere down the road, God could have still healed him. But he had to take, at least experiment with that word of wisdom. And it's the same thing's going to happen to us. We may have to do something. He may be wanting us to be part of our healing. So are we willing to be part of all that? Some of them were brought to Jesus. So the centurion doesn't even bring the guy. He just says, "Hey, can you heal from afar?" The mother-in-law is just there. Jesus is brought into him. And then the rest of them are just kind of brought to Jesus. So someone actually brings them to it. Now let's compare this to our modern era. There are those who have mental illnesses who don't know that they're mentally ill. I had I thought it was going to be a 2-minute conversation, turned into about a 20-minute conversation with someone because they were mentally ill, and it took a long time to try to help them along to do what they needed to do, because they don't know they're mentally ill. I really just wanted to take them to a professional counselor or to someone else to get that help, but they don't even realize that they're mentally ill. It's been a long time. Some of you might have been here when we had him. We had a gentleman who stayed with us who would see ninjas coming out of the ceiling in the dorms. And it would have been fine maybe during the day, but at night when everybody's trying to sleep and he gets up and he's doing kung fu fighting in the middle of the dorm, it's not very comfortable for everybody else in the dorm. Now the thing is that he really is seeing ninjas pop out of the ceiling and attacking him. Now the rest of us, we don't see that. And, in movies, we go with it. But when it happens in real life, we get uncomfortable. So that gentleman has a need. What is our role in helping meet that need? By our, I don't mean staff. I mean, we are a community. We're all in this together.
Give him some kind of mental health.
He doesn't know he's mentally ill. So how do we convince him that he's going to need that mental health? We can't make him do it.
Right.
Unless he's a danger to himself or others, the law says we can't do much. You might be able to make an argument that since he's keeping everybody else awake, that there might be danger to himself, especially if there's someone who is. So let's say he's got sleeping next to a dorm next to somebody who has no problem with killing. That guy keeping him awake all night, that might fit in that danger to self sort of thing. But generally, the guy doing kung fu fighting in the middle of the room, fighting invisible people, not a danger. Can't make him do it. So what's the role we can play?
Christ-like.
We pray. We go with them. Say, I'm going to this meeting today. Would you be willing to go with me?
Try to explain to him that there's
Nothing in there.
nothing there.
Yeah, you might try to explain, but remember, he's seeing it. He's seeing it. For him, it is 100% real.
You need to try to convince him.
Listen to him.
If there's enough people saying that there's nothing
You hope.
there.
You hope.
Right, you hope.
Maybe videotape it so he can see.
Right,
So maybe when he's more stable later on, middle of the night, probably not a time to do it.
right.
Other things we might be able to do.
Lay hands on him, pray for him.
Lay hands. Well, if he's ready, he should fight ninjas. Now laying hands on might be a little dangerous.
Right.
Maybe.
But that's where that danger to others comes in.
Yeah, that's where danger to others. But if he starts fighting you, then you're kind of tricking him into getting that help.
Just be his friend.
Be his friend. You definitely want to be his friend.
And start being a friend, you gain that. If you start being a friend, you'll gain that. You might gain that trust in him. He might actually open up to you and tell you
So-
what's wrong.
So the bottom line is this: is this going to be a quick fix?
No.
No.
It's going to take time. We're going to have to take the effort to go through it. Are there going to be times you're going to be uncomfortable with your friend?
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's say you're out at McDonald's and you can sit down to eat, and all of a sudden he gets up and starts fighting the ninjas. What's your reaction? He's with them.
Embarrassment.
You're going to feel embarrassed, so you're going to deny you know him. But what's that going to do to that trust that he's just talking about?
It's gonna break.
right after we did.
You just lost it.
Help him fight the movers.
And do we understand why they have the rules the way they do, that you have to be a danger to yourself and others? Do you know the history behind that?
No.
Well, let me give you a little history.
Too many people back in the day being sent to insane asylums and orphanages and stuff because their parents or whatever couldn't handle the problem at hand at the time. Not enough resources.
The system was definitely abused. Have you ever seen Beauty and the Beast? Why? You know, is the father really insane, or they just need to get him out of the way? That sort of thing. I'll tell a quick story. My mom got into genealogy. She wanted to, she loved the genealogy. She started tracking where everybody's family came from and got heavily into it. But she took this class and they said, it doesn't count. You might have names from aunts and uncles and giving all this. It doesn't count unless you got paperwork to prove it. Doesn't matter. So my mom got heavily into this research. And so she wanted to find out part of her family. Now, part of her family was from the very tip of Illinois, a little city called Anna, Illinois. And in Anna, Illinois, they have a mental asylum in the tip of in Anna, Illinois. My mom and dad went down to Anna, Illinois, and they were going to look for the records. So they go into, not because it's because of the mental institution, but just because that's where they were from. They go into the city hall and they say, we'd like to look at the records. This is what we want to do. They're like, sure. And they open up this warehouse, and this warehouse is like this room full of boxes. And my mom and dad are looking at each other, and they're like, okay, where do we start? I mean, you got hundreds of thousands of pieces of paper in there. Birth certificates, death certificates, marriage certificates, all this stuff, just all in there. Where do we start? And my dad looks at this stack of boxes that's from the mental asylum. And he looks at my mom and says, with your family, we probably should start there. They're still married, so it worked out. I mean, he's being facetious. He just thought it was making his little joke. But they decided to go ahead and try. Why not? Take a look in the box. And so they're going through the records from that mental asylum. And my dad noticed a pattern in this book. He didn't find any of our family, so my mom's good. But he did see a pattern. And the pattern was almost every other record was a woman who had talked back to her husband. And my dad said, you would have been in here. Because back in the day, that was considered mental illness. You don't talk back to your husband. Well, that's the sort of abuse that was happening with the system. You can't just be a husband saying, oh, my wife's crazy, she just talked back to me. You don't get to do that anymore. So mental illness it's a very good law to have in place, but maybe we need to figure out a way that we could help the guy with the ninja. He may not be a danger to himself and others, but obviously he cannot survive on his own with that capacity. So how do we rewrite the law? How would you rewrite a law that would take care of the issues of abuse of the system, but still be able to help our friend? How would we rewrite the law so we can get him committed, so he can get the help that he needs? He's not going to get it on his own.
Right.
We might be able to trick him into it. And somebody talked about, I got an appointment, go with me, and then really or counsel my buddy.
Rewrite it to say that if you're a danger to yourself and others, that you need to be...
Well, that one's automatic. We already got that one in place.
Okay.
But we need to add to that in some way that allows us to say,
Saying
Mr.
things
Ninja
that
Fighter.
aren't there. Saying things that aren't there.
Petition.
we could petition. But the law could say if you're seeing things that aren't there. But that becomes a danger because I pray and I don't see Jesus, but I'm talking to Jesus.
What?
So if we make it the law that way, I'm in deep trouble.
Well, or mandatory psych.
That's why we're writing the law so it gets a mandatory psych eval. I mean, they would do a psych eval on me, and I would say, yes, I'm speaking to someone I cannot physically see, and that I'm locked up.
That's why we have freedom of religion.
So how do we rewrite a law like that? And that's a question for the book. That's something to put out there for us to think about. But we don't want the abuse. The abuse is wrong. We don't want to have that take place, but we definitely want to help them out. How about those with addiction? How many of us in our addiction were willing to say we were addicted? I wasn't. I just wouldn't even say it. I just pretended like nobody could tell that I'm high right now. Nobody can tell that I'm drunk right now. But once I got sober, I look back and said, yeah, okay, that was stupid. But while we're in it, are we willing to do that? I know a lot of people who aren't willing to say it. They'll stand in front of me and they'll tell you, I have not used in 6 months, but they're high right now. So 6 months, you got a long high. And there are people, I'll just throw this out, there are people who have used and haven't used a long time, but it affected their brain in such a way that they still appear to be high. So it's not an automatic, but sometimes you know. So how do we help that person? I mean, we're seeing people in the stories that they brought people to Jesus. How do we bring that person to Jesus? Gotta love them, build the trust that we talked about.
Have good character and stuff when they can see Jesus in you.
So it's the way we live our lives. You know, St. Francis said this, and I think it's an important lesson. I'm paraphrasing him, so it's not a direct quote. So, but he said this is that to live the right life, this is his standard of living. I'm going to read the Gospels, and I'm going to do what it says. Pretty simple, hard to do. But what would happen if we did that among those who are mentally ill and those who are in addiction? What would that look like for us to do that?
An example towards them.
Be an example for that person. Say, oh, maybe I could do it.
In the UK, they have free healthcare. So what if like we got something like free, not necessarily healthcare, but like drug rehab or something like that, or wouldn't cost anything.
We have to see how we get them into rehab when that's appropriate.
Yeah, the thing is trying to get them in that part. Trying to
They
get them
have to want it.
They have to want it. The very best programs ever written, you put them in there, and if they don't want it, it's not going to work.
It's just like with smoking. When I was in the hospital, I went over a month without a cigarette, but the minute I came out, I wanted one.
So if we can lock you up when you
don't-
can't have
when
one.
Right, when you
Change the
can't
scene-
have
if that
one,
changes
it's a
scenery.
different, it's a different thing, but when you have the option,
Yeah.
it's totally different.
So that brings us to the most important question in
Knowing
this whole
you can't,
section.
knowing you can't.
Right.
That means.
How far can we go to help someone else? It would be helpful to help you quit smoking by locking you up.
Right, right.
It would be helpful to you long term. And
Right, but you'd have to keep me locked up.
we have to keep you locked up.
Right, because the minute I'm free, I'm gonna want another
So
one.
in a way, it would be loving to lock you up, as strange as that sounds. However, we can't do that forever.
Right.
So how far is too far? What does intervention really look like? We're trying to love those who are hurting.
And would freeing them be enabling them?
It's bring by letting you out of the hospital. Do we sign your death warrant? I mean,
Exactly.
that's a scary. I mean, these are questions for us to ponder and think about. You know, we give someone money who we know they're going to go do some drugs on it. Are we empowering them to die? Are we responsible for that? I will say some cities and states are starting to convict drug dealers for that, for overdoses, which is.
But by not giving them money.
Someone on the street would ask for money, I wouldn't give them money. I'd say, can I buy you something to eat? Can I buy you something to drink? And I would give them the stuff like, I'll give you the food. You want food? I'll go get you the food. I won't give you the money to go get it. I'll actually get you the food.
And sometimes it's just freeing their own money to be able to use for the drugs and
Yeah.
alcohol. So we also got to be thinking clear. We got to know them. That trust issue, getting to know them first. But how far is too far in this intervention bit? I mean, we could lock everybody down and nobody could use.
You're taking away their power, taking away their them.
Then they find ways to smuggle stuff in, so.
Yeah, that happens. I mean, prisons are officially tobacco-free zones, but I visit with enough inmates to know that they smell like tobacco smoke. Probably
It
somewhere.
happens. It happens.
But that's supposed to be a secure place that none of that stuff can get in.
If you don't give them the option, then they're gonna go right back to using once they get out.
So there is a whole process of helping someone no longer want to use. But what stops you? You know, I had a friend who, he ate everything. He was just a junk food, deep fried. I mean, that was the sort of thing he did. And all his friends say, you know what, that's going to come back and bite you at some point down the road. And then when it did, he was surprised. But we wanted to prevent. We didn't want him to have that heart issue and the stroke. And same with addiction. I don't want, I carry with me every single day, everywhere I go, except for around my house, I carry my Narcan with me. And because I'm ready. And I hope I don't use this one, but odds are I will if I hang out here long enough. But I don't want to get to the place where I have to use the Narcan. I'd rather you just not use anything that I have to use it for. So how do we help people that don't want help?
You can't.
Well, that's the fear. That's what I'm. That's the answer I don't want, but it is
If
true.
they're not ready to change, no matter what we do, it's not gonna, you have to be ready to change.
So how do we love them when we know that if they continue down the road they're at, it's probably going to kill them?
Show compassion,
Show compassion.
listen to them. I know this for a fact, you can give up on them.
Definitely don't give up. There's a temptation to give up. There's no question on that. But you got to keep hoping. But what does not giving up look like? Does that mean by not giving up? Does that mean I have to let them be in my house?
No.
Nope.
My
Give
grandpa
enough
used
of
to
being
say,
not having
God,
anything.
God helps those that help themselves.
That's not actually in the Bible. It's a,
No, my grandpa
yeah,
used to
your grandpa
say-
said that, but that's a common phrase.
Yes.
Some people think it's in the Bible, so I just want to clarify.
No.
You
No.
don't wanna close the door, but you wanna lay some rules in it.
Exactly.
There's gotta be remember, close the doors. Just don't, give them any money or anything, just show them love, compassion.
Look them in the eye, acknowledge them as humanity, call them by name if you know their name.
Yes, listen to them.
Let them feel like they're part of the equation. I think if you force it, they're going to go more.
Yeah.
And if we've been through addiction, we share our story.
Share your
And
story.
say-
Yeah.
And say that if I can do it, you can too.
And it all depends on how you speak it to them.
Yeah.
And the in Revelation it talks about they overcome the enemy through the word of our testimony.
Yes.
And so really you are fighting the enemy. You're not fighting that person in addiction. That's not really the enemy. They have an enemy within them, and we need to help set that free inside of them. And so sharing our testimony is one of the most powerful tools we got.
I was gonna say, you have to be careful how you share your testimony, because everybody can't handle
You got a tough
everybody
guy
else's
and you
story.
got a
Sometimes
weak
it'll
one.
send them
You got a weak
deeper
person.
into their addiction.
Give them an
It's just like with me, I can't handle going to like AA meetings because it's a trigger for me. To sit there and listen to everybody else's story makes me wanna drink. It's depressing to me.
Yeah. And that you're not the first person I heard say that. That's a common thing that comes up. Because, and overall, talking about our addictions and sharing that with each other and working through the steps together, that's generally a good idea, but it doesn't work for everybody. We've already kind of talked about that a little bit. There's no one-size-fits-all solution to our problems.
I can relate to what she's saying, because a lot of groups, I attend many groups, and some of them is mostly just sitting around glorifying what they used to do.
It's a war story. Look how cool I was. I survived, 4 overdoses. And I've actually saw videos. One of the guys who comes through here once in a while, they actually have a video, a police cam of him being hit with, they had put 2 Narcans in him to bring him back to life. So he's got the full video footage of this. And you know what's really strange to me is that didn't stop him.
Yes.
He still uses.
I had a nephew the same way. They hit him with 6 Narcans when the ambulance showed up. Luckily, I was there to hold him up and keep him breathing, because he was already gurgling. And he went to the hospital and came out looking for it again.
So loving is saying, we're going to try to bring you back to life. We're going to try to keep you alive. But we have to also recognize, I still have to love you when you are a knucklehead and go back and do it anyway.
Some people are addicted to overdosing and being pulled out of the overdose as well.
Because that's a great story. I mean, there's something really exciting about
It's
that.
like a cheating death thing, kind of.
Oh, yeah. Look at me. I feel that when I jump out of airplanes. I jump out of an airplane, I'm like, I face death and look at me. And it's similar with that. It's unfortunate we get to that level.
They feel like they're immortal.
Yeah. And I felt that when I left airborne school. I was like, nothing touched me now. And it wasn't, and God will humble you if you start to feel like you're immortal. And he did that pretty quick in my life. So we don't really talk much about the parables. We're trying to focus in on actions he does. But the Good Samaritan story, we're trying to love. This guy had no need. He had a huge need, but he didn't have anybody to bring him into help. It took a Samaritan to say, I see the need. And so the first thing we're going to have to do is recognize, you are high right now. I recognize that. I see that. We have to notice it. We have to acknowledge your humanity. You have great value. I want to help you do it. We also know you cannot flourish while you're high or you're drunk or you're surfing porn. You cannot flourish. You may think you're flourishing, but you can't. So we have to love them enough to see that and know that, and then know how to love them and care about them. The other action I want to highlight from that story is that he didn't just give that quick handout and then be done. He took him to an end to get further help. So many times when my aunt had her addictions growing up, somebody took her to treatment. When she had her children, people took her children and said, we're going to watch your children for the next month while you are in treatment. They took away her excuses. But how does it feel to try to take away someone's excuses?
Sometimes you feel loved. I mean, if you're not rebelling and you're ready, and you keep saying you're ready, but you're sitting there getting high, it feels a lot better than someone offers there.
I think we also come back to, do we know we're making excuses? Oh, I can't do it right now. My kid's got to play.
You have to be able to become terms with who you are, and if you can't do that or can't get past it, you know.
Some people just don't know how to ask. So, I mean, there's like that fear of like, oh, they're not gonna help me, why would I ask them? Or they don't.
Or they assume, I've gone to the well too many times. Too
Yeah.
many people try to help me.
Sometimes
reject it before they
it's
reject it.
just, it becomes habitual. The excuses, they become habitual. And we get to a point where the asking is no longer believable. So why would I ask anyway? You know?
Well,
They're not gonna believe that I'm sincere this time, so why ask?
I'm not going to ask for raising of hands, but how many have been through multiple recovery programs? 30 days, 60 days, year programs, and relapsed. And so you've been through multiple. So you eventually said, well, what's the use? What is the outcome of, what's the goal for most recovery programs?
They go back and use.
Change the way you think.
Continue treatment afterwards.
Well, that's what we're aiming for. But while they're in the program, what's their measure of success?
Change the way you think.
We need to change the way you
Now
think.
You gotta change everything in your life to get it better, on the right track.
And quit hanging out with
That's
the
changed
same
my
people.
life.
The main thing is just,
There is a big piece of that. So you start picking new friends. We cover that in a different
Things
spot.
you
but-
cannot change.
The truth is, most recovery programs just want to get you clean and sober.
Yeah.
You got 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, whatever it is their target is, but they got a date. You're clean and sober. But beyond that, what do you really want? So they'll measure success. You'll go say, well, we had 60 people who came in high, and look at them, all sober now. Yay us. Give us some funding.
But they're sober because they didn't have the access to it. Because of the shit.
Exactly. Coming back to why she didn't smoke for a month.
change the settings on them.
Didn't even
Environment.
want one, came out not
Yeah.
wanting one, is
So
still
success is going to be, you get out, you don't want a cigarette. So if somehow we were able to get tobacco cessation into that hospital while you were there, you were open to it, maybe at that season. When you come out, and I got the freedom. So we've got to teach you, encourage you, train you, because you're already trained to smoke. We got to untrain that behavior into new behaviors. So an outcome, and that's what just kind of highlight what the mission's all about. We want you to overcome and have an outcome of, I don't want it anymore.
And I don't, it's the habit of putting something to my mouth.
And there's all sorts of habits, right?
And I don't wanna gain weight, so I'm trying not to eat.
Well, you're going to have to eat. That's a whole other problem.
No, I don't wanna overeat, so.
Gums, sunflower seeds.
Yeah, I have no teeth.
Trying not to replace one habit with another.
You know, we're losing the other food. There's a lot of
So this is I'm going to come to some bottom lines. Is we want an outcome. We want an outcome of complete freedom. We are not looking around at every corner saying, oh, you know, if I go over there, I might smoke, or if I go there, I might drink. It's not going to happen. That's not who I am. So one of the things is changing your identity. So some of you might say, I'm an ex-smoker. Well, what do you say, I'm a non-smoker? There's a difference there. A non-smoker is that I just don't smoke. You come and offer me, every one of you could come and offer me your whole pack of cigarettes. Unless you're trying to get rid of it, I will destroy it for you. But I'm not going to be saying, oh, thank you for those cigarettes, I'm going to go smoke them. I've never, you're safe offering me your cigarettes if you're thinking I'm going to smoke them. Because I'm not a smoker. So it's not even a temptation for me. So an outcome is you're free. You're free of that completely. That's the outcome target.
I'll smoke them.
Well, see, I can't offer you any. So
You can bring them to me. I'll give
So we
them.
try to create an environment where you start to learn, you start to change your identity, you start to get past all that.
See, here recently, I think, well, before I came here, I was a real bad alcoholic. I struggled, and then back in November, I just quit, getting touching again. Well, now I am able to walk right through a liquor store or whatever, be around it and not even want it. You know what I mean? People ask me, no, thank you. You know what I mean?
So we're aiming for those perfect outcomes, those good outcomes. The life has changed. So it's no longer a temptation. You can walk through that liquor aisle and you're not feeling this pull anymore. So you have the freedom. The other outcome is you start to get things restored. So in my addiction, I lost a lot of relationships. So getting those relationships back. Even though I never got fired from a job, I quit jobs so I can go drink. As foolish as that is. I quit school to go surf porn. It's crazy when I think back on it, but I lost all that. So by getting freedom, I now get some of that stuff back. That's what that outcome starts to look like, is you start to get some of that stuff back. I'm a college professor on the side, and every one of my students are getting their education back. They're all at college level at this point. So some of them had dropped out of high school. One of them had dropped out of junior high. Didn't even get to high school. Had him in school. And so by the time I met him, they had already worked through, catching up, getting the GED and doing all that. But man, they're getting their life back. And that's exciting to watch. So just to kind of, again, we're going to kind of draw this to a close here. The thing that is most common that we see is Jesus is going to show compassion for those people. And remember what compassion is.
No.
The definition of compassion is suffer with. And if you ever try to help somebody with addiction, you are going to suffer. There is no way around it because they don't necessarily know it. So if I'm going to help that mentally ill person, I'm going to help that person in addiction, I'm going to help that person who doesn't want help, I'm going to suffer with them. So the idea of going to a mental health appointment with them, that might be the right answer. That might be what we can offer. And they're going to see you with them, and you build the trust that we talked about over here. But to build that trust, you're going to have to suffer with. Any help that you're not suffering with them is not help. It is no longer compassion. If I go to a third world country where they have a hurricane or flooding or any of those things, when I'm in that country, I am suffering with them. And it's the same thing as we're local. We see someone who's suffering, how can we suffer with them? And then help them move forward with all that. So we've got some good answers, some good things I can work into the book, so I appreciate your support and all that today. Let me just say a quick prayer, and we'll go about our day. Jesus, we thank you for your willingness to come to this earth and have compassion on us by suffering, the rejection, just the everyday life, being tired and hungry, frustrated. You dealt with all that. And then you chose to suffer by dying on the cross for our sins. And we are so appreciative of that. Help us to not take that for granted. Help us to see our own need, repent, and live a life of freedom that you have offered to us.